I think that we struggle. I think one of the reasons we struggle is because we no longer believe in something beyond ourselves.
Olá a todos, sejam muito bem-vindos a mais um episódio da série Do Chão Não Passa. Esse é o quinto episódio e hoje ele vai ser um pouco diferente. Hoje eu tô aqui de única entrevistadora e não temos participações de pessoas assistindo ao vivo. Isso porque estamos em contato com uma entrevistada que fala conosco direto da Inglaterra, lá em Londres. E a entrevista vai acontecer em inglês, então quem está nos vendo por vídeo pode acompanhar através das legendas. Quem está nos ouvindo por áudio, o áudio original em inglês será mantido e em alguns momentos da entrevista eu vou entrar com áudio em português, traduzindo de forma um pouco resumida as coisas que estão sendo ditas. Então a nossa convidada é uma cineasta que viveu uma história muito profunda, muito inspiradora e que eu acredito que pode nos inspirar muito nesse momento que estamos vivendo, porque tudo que ela viveu tem muito a ver com esse momento de isolamento social e de pandemia que nós estamos atravessando no mundo. Vamos falar um pouco sobre isso na entrevista de hoje. Então, ela é uma cineasta, ela é a diretora de um filme chamado My Beautiful Broken Brain, que tem a produção executiva do David Lynch, e o nome dela é Lotje Sodderland. So welcome, Lotje. It's very nice to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I love the Portuguese language. The way that you speak it is so beautiful, and it really reminds me of my trip to Brazil, which was so special.
I'm glad. I remember that when you came here, you said that you loved Portuguese. You were like listening people talking in Portuguese and like, wow.
So lovely, so beautiful. It's quite different to the Portuguese they speak in Portugal, because I went there recently. Yes. And it's really different, really different.
That's true. So Lotje, it's very nice to have you here to be one of our guests in Do Chão Não Passa, which is the name in Portuguese of our show. Mm-hmm. To start our conversation, I would like to invite you to share with us your story, how you found your inner floor.
So 8.5 years ago, it was November, and I lived by myself in Shoreditch, which is a very old part of East London. And I woke up in the middle of the night and I had a very strong pain, but not a headache, a very particular, very extreme kind of pain in my head. Basically, my brain had started to bleed, but I had no idea what was happening because my ability to think in a coherent way and to find a solution to my problem had kind of evaporated because of the damage that was happening in my brain already right away. And I was struggling, and I kind of went in and out of consciousness for a few hours. And the reason I know that it was a few hours is because it was dark when it began. And when I found my solution, it was light. And actually I was admitted to the hospital at 1 p.m. So I have the record of the time I came in. So I know the struggle went on for a long time. I was very sick and I was like in a lot of pain and I was really frightened and I felt that I was dying, but I didn't know what was happening or, you know, how to solve my problem. I didn't know how to put clothes on and I didn't know how to use my phone. I knew that my phone would be able to help me, but I couldn't use it. I didn't know how to press the buttons or like which number to call. And then I had this moment of kind of this magical moment of insight where I suddenly knew how to get dressed and walk outside. And I walked outside and I walked across the street into a hotel and I tried to speak to the guy at the reception, but I couldn't speak. And then I kind of made my way to the bathroom and I fell on the floor and I lost consciousness again in the bathroom. and then somebody called an ambulance. And I think the guy at the reception thought I was, because there's a lot of people with drug issues and alcohol issues in that neighborhood, and I think he just thought I was, you know, drunk or on drugs, and so he didn't see that it was a medical crisis, because it was invisible, strangely enough. It was happening in my head. And then I woke up 2 days later from an induced coma, and that was the beginning of my new life. So basically they put me in an induced coma to calm down the whole body and to be able to operate on my brain. They opened the left side of my head and removed I think it was a clot. I always get confused, but yeah, I think it was a clot. And then they sewed the head back up, and waited a couple of days. And then they didn't know what the outcome of the surgery was going to be. The first thing I remember is being in a trolley, a hospital trolley, in a lift with a guy who works in the hospital, who was kind of like standing at the trolley. And I just remember opening my eyes, and he just looked, you know, like just another patient. It's a really interesting memory, because I was waking up into a new world. It was quite a really extraordinary and unique experience. And for him, it was a very mundane moment, because it's what he does all day. And then the next thing I remember is I do remember my mum and my brother. And then I just remember my friends, like lots of friends came, even from other countries, had come to visit, to see me. And they looked really sad and distressed. And it was just quite awkward, because I couldn't speak, but I did recognize, I knew who I was deep down. Like I knew that I was perhaps a different version of myself, but I knew who I was at the core, sort of beyond my abilities that I had lost. And my friends, because I couldn't speak, I couldn't say, you know, don't worry, I'm fine. They were just like, oh dear, because I was lying there like this. And and then I was in intensive care for a bit, and then I just started this really, really, really long process of recovery that was both really painful and really, really intense, as well as really I'm just so grateful. I learned so much, and I transformed as a person, but also my life, my lifestyle, and my I had to transform because I had a very limited capacity. So that's it in a nutshell.
You said that you spoke about this memory when you woke up and saw that doctor in a very Monday morning moment. And you said that it was an amazing moment for you, because it was like you were awakening for a new life, you said. But at the same time, you speak about this extremely painful process that you went through. Can you talk about this moment of discovery and at the same time limitation, and how that made you go through this process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, basically those first few days of awakening were really blissful. They were pure bliss, because I had no history. I didn't know, I didn't have a past or a future. It was like I was just an empty shell, which was really, really nice. You don't know where you come from or where you're going. So it's that sense of being present that people sort of search for in meditation, but I'd never done meditation before the stroke. It's something that, when I told people later, they were like, oh wow, that's so cool, that's what I've been looking for all my life. And I was like, really? So that those initial first few days of pure awareness without a past or a future, just being without complications of your personal story and your sense of self, in a way, your ego, was really beautiful and just really special and really peaceful and really interesting. But then when the kind of official recovery began, so when doctors and specialists and just, I suppose, my brain recovering as well, started to sort of solidify, things became really difficult because the doctors and the specialists, even though they saved my life, and I'm obviously eternally grateful for that. There's something about the neurological recovery process that doesn't really work for people who have survived things like that, because you're constantly being measured by your new limitations. So it's like, try and write. You've lost the ability to write, and you can't really speak, you can't read, you can't see properly, your eyes, your vision is not correct. You used to be very high achieving, and you're not, maybe you never will be again. So you start to be measured by all these limitations, whereas I myself was experiencing, I thought was really magical and special. And I felt like I'd accessed a new dimension. But that was kind of, that obviously isn't what people are going to focus on. So it was quite a conflicting situation. There was my inner kind of awakening, or like new dimension, called it kind of discovery, that was exciting and beautiful and really interesting and sometimes frightening as well. And then there was the outside world, which was looking in and judging. But there was also from my inner self, like the realization that my life was never going to be how it was before. I did lots of traveling, I loved working, I had loads of friends, I was very social and all these things, and suddenly all of that was gone. And when my friends and everything went back to normal, that their lives went back to normal, and I was still there. And because it's such a long recovery, it's quite an isolating experience. And because it's inside your head, literally, your sort of your mind and your brain is suddenly transformed. It's really, really personal, and it's something that's quite hard to share with others. So yeah, it's a complex and conflicting experience.
One of the reasons why I invited you to this show is because I feel like our whole humanity is crossing a very similar process as this one that you went through in your personal experience. I feel like our lives have suddenly deeply changed, and we run the same risk of trying to measure what we can no longer do, instead of opening ourselves for some new possibilities. How was it that you found this path of enjoying what was good about this sudden change?
Well, I did think that when the coronavirus kicked in, a few months ago, it was so sudden and so extreme and so devastating for so many people. But I did start to see as well that people were kind of valuing things in a different way. And I did think, it's kind of like a global brain hemorrhage situation. There is definitely a comparison, but I've been really, really very lucky. I have a very optimistic personality. That's also something I was born with, which really, really helped. But I suppose the things that I practiced that I could share, that anyone, in any situation could practice or use as a kind of aspect of a worldview, is that actually limitations, so less, having less can make you happier, can be an access to a different lifestyle, different values. And the reason for that is I think that we live in a world where, we're sort of taught and sort of programmed to believe that acquisition is the goal, to acquire more, to be more successful, to have more money. But then I think that anyone who has done that has found that isn't where happiness lies. And actually, I think that the limitations, having, you know, to an extent, limitations can actually give you access to a more meaningful life. That was certainly my experience. So initially, like I said, I was really, you know, part of me was really devastated by the fact that my lifestyle had evaporated. So I wasn't able to work, I wasn't able to travel, I wasn't able to socialize, I wasn't able to do all of these things that I thought made me who I was. I thought that they defined me. With time and with this kind of navigation inside myself, that I discovered that you can find meaning actually perhaps more easily without all of those external attributes that kind of define us as a society in you know, in the modern world. You kind of, when you had a major brain trauma, you were forced to look within because there's nowhere else to look. And then you find that you are not actually all of these. You're not someone who travels a lot, someone who works a lot, someone who has a lot of friends. You're something else, something much more universal and something much more, I think, meaningful and magical. So that was my experience. And then I did start practicing meditation, which was actually the sort of turning point that made things much more bearable, I think, because I was in hospital for a long time as an inpatient, and that was really horrible, really, really horrible, and just made things worse. And it was after that I discovered meditation, and that's where that kind of inclination to look within was really, you know, that had already happened. That process had already begun without the meditation, but with the meditation, it kind of cultivates your ability to do that. And again, meditation is something that anybody can do in any situation, you know, as long as you know, you have a mind and a brain, you can do that. So practice that, and it's something that can really transform the way that you experience the world, the way you experience emotions, and the way you connect with the world around you, with people, or with just nature, or you know, all aspects of the world around you. So
did you recover those abilities of reading, for example, with meditation?
I never recovered reading. I still can't really read. I mean, I can, but really slowly, because I have this problem in my peripheral vision. So on this side, I can't really see. That combined with the language problem, the ability to the language faculty in the brain, the damage on that, the combination of the visual and the language damage makes reading really hard. But I'm reading my 4th novel now in 8.5 years, and I'm really enjoying it, but it's very, very slow. My meditation practice helped me to accept, and that's actually the most important thing in the process of transformation. That's where you begin to learn to live in a new way, to see things in a different way, and to accept your new reality. So, I mean, in that sense, it was absolutely fundamental in my recovery. I still meditate every day, and I really notice if I don't do it, I go a bit crazy, even in just one day.
When I talk to you and I send WhatsApp and you answer me texting, I imagine, how does it work for you? How do you make your broken brain function in your daily life to look so functioning? You look so functional. It's so. I almost forgot you had a stroke when I speak to you.
Thank you for saying those nice things. Yeah. If you send me a really short message, I'll just read it myself, you know, because I like to practice. I want to practice. But if it's a longer message, I'll translate it with Siri. So I have Siri on my phone and on my laptop, and I listen to it as a computer kind of voice. I can't process information in the same way as somebody who hasn't had a brain injury, but I can process it to some extent. But now I can have, you know, a relatively normal life, but I do go to bed really early. I meditate every morning. I have to eat quite a lot. I travel now, obviously not now, and maybe not as much in the future, but, you know, because of, you know, the climate change, as well as, you know, the coronavirus, and more awareness around actually the negative impact of travel. But I have, in the last few years, I have been able to travel again. I've been able to be independent. I can be completely independent now, because you relearn. The brain has this incredible ability to reconnect or to build new connections. So you may not be the same, you may not have the same abilities neurologically, but you can kind of like build a new version of yourself that's slightly different. It might be slightly better.
You were saying about this new version of yourself, and I wanted to ask you about turning everything you were living in a movie. Can you tell us a bit about this process of becoming a filmmaker because of the stroke, because of the new version of yourself?
I think, well, it's a really good example actually of what you can do with limitations. So before the stroke, I was a producer, like a film producer. And to do that, you need to have, you know, a very highly functioning brain. You need to be able to do really complicated maths, to do budgets. You need to write to millions of people every day. You know, you have to communicate constantly and have, like, you know, you need to be a multitasking queen. And of course, it took a long time to get used to not being that person, not being able to do all of that stuff. But then I started to realize that my brain had become more, or I had more access to the creative part of my brain. So now, like, you know, the whole world is all just images, much less information. It's very visual. And then I started to learn how to, you know, use a proper camera and basically become a director. So again, that was also luck in a way, because I was already in that world that has, you know, these visual professionals working with images. And so I just I started to focus on filmmaking, and I'm just so happy with it. I'm so much happier than I was as a producer. And I realized that when I was a teenager, I always said, oh, I want to make films, but I didn't, you know, I never followed it up. I think in life you get distracted from your true kind of core of who you are beyond all of these external things. It's something that's quite hard to talk about because it's quite magical, but yeah, if you lose all these layers, suddenly, you know, there's something more kind of raw and real about it. And that can be a really positive thing, even though it can be painful as well.
So you chose to name your movie My Beautiful Broken Brain. Do you feel like something needs to break in order to the beauty to appear in one's life?
I think it's a shame that something has to break, because it would be really great if we could find that meaning and truth and magic without having to go through trauma first. From what I can, you know, from what I've seen, when you have a traumatic event, it's really hard to see the beauty in it because it's just horrible, basically. But I think that if we can develop the ability to see beauty in vulnerability, for example, or to see our own development and transformation in painful periods, times of pain, it would be great if we were taught that in school, which clearly is not going to happen. But it would be great if that was part of our development as human beings, rather than having to wait and then be lucky enough to get access to that positive element of the traumatic experience, or that may come after the traumatic experience. So it does seem to be the case that you have to go through something really intense to get there, but I don't think that should be, you know, I wish it was different. I wish it was something that we were programmed or taught, or, you know, something we practiced, even if everything's fine.
I'm listening to you and I'm remembering when I met you 3.5 years ago, that you said that in your life before the stroke, you were always in the periphery of yourself and running very fast. And because of the stroke, you went to the center. And when I'm listening to you now, I feel like we're trained to go to our peripheries somehow, to try to show something to the world. So basically what you're saying is that you wished we were trained from kids in our systems to stay in our center and not go to our peripheries. Is that it?
In a way, yeah. I think there is something really exciting about the periphery as well. And it's almost, I feel like it's something that we need to do as human beings, or at least I needed to kind of experiment with the core, or no, sorry, with the edge. Yeah, I think it'd be great if we had that kind of core essence as part of our development, but still have the option to go to the edge, always knowing that the core is still there, so that you won't go too far, if you know what I mean, which I think we do a lot.
Or get lost.
We get lost, exactly. I think searching is really important, and it's part of our development, as our natural evolution, but it shouldn't be the only thing. We should always be able to return to the center if we can.
You speak a lot about magic.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to you, you bring these words. Can you talk about that?
I think I use the word magic to kind of as an all-encompassing word that relates to the invisible. I use the word magic a lot because I sort of use it to describe anything that belongs to me in that realm of the invisible or the intangible, which I think is such an interesting realm, but it's quite hard to talk about with words. And so I think I use magic a lot because I'm really interested in that realm. But I think because the words aren't really there to describe that, the experiences or the experience of accessing that realm, I think I end up using magic for anything to do with that.
And also, it's also hard to try to achieve it with the mind. We try to understand, to get into a conclusion, but then you lose it because it's a state. It's not like a concept or something you can put in a bottle and give a shape to it, right?
Exactly. And it doesn't have really, the more you try to use words, the less close you are to it in a way. It's a state without words, I think. And that's why we get all confused, because we use words for everything. We use our inner narrative to, for our very essence, that's what kind of like we rely on constantly, even if we're not even aware of it. And so I think we actually need to get rid of it in a way to get to that.
This is something interesting you're talking about, because I also feel like before the coronavirus, we were in the middle of a language pandemic. Speaking too much, thinking too much, writing too much, and like lost in a language labyrinth and trying to find a way out, speaking more and writing more and producing more verbal language. Do you feel like we as human beings got a bit lost in language and we need to come back from that to a place of more quietness to be able to connect again with each other?
I felt that in Brazil it was different. I felt people were much more connected in Brazil than here in the United Kingdom. There's a really strong sense of isolation here. It's actually been, officially identified by the government health bodies that loneliness is like a chronic problem here now, that kind of leads to more tangible health conditions. So I totally agree. And I think even with the coronavirus, I actually started getting quite overwhelmed with the amount of Zoom meetings, and because it was like, actually this is a really good opportunity for more silence, more peaceful kind of times. But you do see quite a lot of mini transformations, people being selfless, people behaving in a selfless way, and just being so much compassion, and also just people noticing things more, people noticing nature, also because it happened in spring. So here we started seeing, you could see it, everyone was talking about it, the trees, and just normal people, not strange people like me, but like, people just started appreciating little things. And I've definitely noticed that. Yeah. And you see people being nice to each other, friendly and appreciative, that you maybe didn't see before. There wasn't that sense of appreciation for other people, for others, that there is now. I think because there's so much loss as well, you see more appreciation. I hope that the positive changes will be permanent,
So for everyone that now is experiencing some kind of pain or are going through a hard time, what can you share from your personal experience to help those people right now?
I think what I say to other stroke survivors when they ask me, because I do get asked that a lot, like, what do I do? How do I stop this nightmare? How do I turn it into something positive? And I think it's important to try and see the magic or the beauty or some positive aspect in this painful experience, whether it's your own growth as a person, your own development as a person. You're becoming stronger, you're becoming more resilient. You're going to prove to yourself that you can be graceful with this torturous experience, and also to know that things change constantly. Things don't stay the same ever. Everything's constantly changing from second to second, or even less, from millisecond to millisecond. And whatever pain you're in now will subside, and and things will get better. And that's quite an annoying thing to say when you're in a lot of pain, but it's good to know that, like, that whatever you're feeling now, it's not going to last. It'll change, because we are, as human beings in this world, constantly changing and transforming. So it's nice to remember that transformation is a big part of humanity's experience. It's quite kind of comforting to remember that.
I remember when you came to São Paulo, and I asked you if you preferred São Paulo with your new brain or with your old brain, because you had been to São Paulo before, and you answered definitely with the new brain. and I remember walking with you on the streets and seeing you amazed by the flowers and the wires and the way architecture made no sense at all, but some kind ended up making sense. And so I feel like when you speak about magic, you are talking about being available to be enchanted by life, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That sense of enchantment, even with the mundane. I think enchantment was a really big part of our existence when we believed in God. And I'm not saying that you should believe in God necessarily at all. I'm just saying that I think for a long time, it was a really big part of humanity's makeup, humanity's being. I think that we struggle. I think one of the reasons we struggle is because we no longer believe in something beyond ourselves. And I think it can be really helpful to try and, even if it's not God, or maybe it's nature, maybe it's running in the park, it could be anything, but it's to access something that's not material. I think that's something that would be really good if we could get into that in our modern world.
That's awesome, Lotje. Thank you very much for being in our show. It was a pleasure to listen to you. I think I always learn a lot from you, neurologically, magically, and I hope you keep having this magic in your daily life. Sure.
To thank you very, very much for inviting me to speak with you, and that I always feel like our conversations bring me so much, and thank you so much, because there's something in the connection between us that's really magical. So thank you.
That's true. I feel the same way. I feel like when I look at my life, when I first met you and right now, I see how much I changed. And I really feel that you had an important role on that meeting you and connecting to your story really touched me. So I'm really grateful to be here with you again.
Me too, grateful.
So, back to Portuguese. Então, muito obrigada a todos que nos assistiram. Recebemos aqui a Lotje Sodderland, cineasta e autora de filmes como My Beautiful Broken Brain, que vocês podem assistir no Netflix. Muito obrigada a todos e até a próxima edição.